He paid a fortune to forget every dollar, every mansion, every memory of his own name. With 1 year to live, a dying billionaire erased his mind and planted himself, a stranger with nothing, in his wife's village. His final experiment, to see if she would fall in love with the man when the money was gone. He doesn't know her, she doesn't know him, and the clock is already ticking. His name was Kwame Asante, a titan of tech across Africa, with a net worth surpassing $1.2 billion. But a terminal diagnosis gave him 12 months. Instead of spending it in luxury, he commissioned a radical, untested neural procedure. It would not save his body. Its goal was to answer one haunting question before he died. Was his entire life's love built on truth, or just his fortune? This is what happened when he woke up with nothing. The procedure was conducted in a sterile private medbay on his yacht, anchored off Dakar. No hospital would sanction it. Dr. Nneka Okafor, a pioneering but controversial neuroethicist, led the team. Their target, the cortical and hippocampal neural pathways associated with episodic and autobiographical memory. Using targeted magnetic resonance-guided focused ultrasound, they would induce a temporary reversible neural disconnect, a cognitive tabula rasa. Kwame would forget his name, his companies, his entire history. He signed the final waivers not as a billionaire, but as a patient, a dying man purchasing a final truth. His life before the diagnosis was a monument of his own making. Born in a village not unlike the one he would soon enter, Kwame had built Asante Digital from a single internet cafe in Accra into a continental force, worth over $1.3 billion. He married Amara 22 years ago. Their love story was the stuff of magazine profiles, the brilliant, relentless builder and the compassionate, grounded artist who founded rural schools. Their public image was flawless, but in his private moments, especially after the diagnosis, a corrosive doubt took root. Was it him she loved, or the empire he provided? Did her compassion define her, or was it just a privilege of his wealth? The idea for the experiment came from a place of deep, painful love. He confessed his fear to Dr. Okafor during a consult. She initially refused. It was unethical, monstrous to deceive his wife this way, but Kwame's argument was simple and devastating. If her love is real, she is not being deceived. She will love the man, not the memory, and if it is not, then I have been living the deception for 22 years. I have 1 year left. I need to know which truth I am dying in. The plan was horrifying in its precision. After the neural procedure, he would be placed in Amara's home village of Koforidua, Ghana. His documents would identify him as Kofi, a man from a distant region with no family, seeking casual labor. A modest trust fund inaccessible to him would pay for a small rented room and basic food, a life of simple poverty. Dr. Okafor's team would monitor everything from a mobile lab nearby, his vitals, his location, and via discreet village observers, his interactions. Amara, who split her time between their Accra penthouse and her charitable work in Koforidua, would be home for a 6-week stay. The experiment was simple. In the shadow of his own death, would she unknowingly fall in love with her own husband again? The last thing Kwame Asante remembered was the gentle hum of the MRI and Dr. Okafor's calm voice counting backward from 10. His world did not fade to black. It dissolved into a formless grey static. There were no dreams, no memories, just absence. He woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of dust and wood smoke. He was lying on a thin mattress in a small plain room with cement walls. Panic, pure and animal, seized him. He sat bolt upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at his hands. They were strong but unfamiliar. He knew nothing, not his name, not how he got here, not what he was. The only concrete thing in the universe was a deep, primal thirst and a crushing emptiness in his stomach. He was a 30-year-old man with the history of a newborn. This was the first moment of his new life. And in the village market that very morning, Amara Asante was buying vegetables, utterly unaware that the lost-looking stranger by the well was the love of her life. Those first days were a raw, terrifying birth into a world of lack. The man who knew himself only as Kofi moved through Koforidua in a haze of primal need. Hunger was a constant, sharp companion. The small stipend from his distant cousin, actually a shell account managed by Dr. Okafor's team, covered a rented room and meager meals of kenki and fish. He took the only work he could find, hauling stones for a wall being built at the edge of the village. His muscles, unused to such labor, burned and shook by midday. He was strong, but the strength felt borrowed, unfamiliar. He did not know that his body had been maintained by personal trainers and nutritionists. He only knew the dust, the ache, and the profound loneliness of a mind with no past. In the mobile lab parked discreetly in a cocoa grove 2 kilometers away, Dr. Nenika Okafor watched the data streams with clinical detachment but a growing moral chill. Heart rate, cortisol levels, sleep patterns all indicated severe stress and disorientation. On screen, Kofi was a blip on a map, a series of biophysical readouts, but through the lens of a hidden camera near the worksite, she saw the man. The confusion in his eyes as he fumbled with tools, the quiet dignity with which he accepted his meager pay. Subject is adapting to baseline survival parameters, she dictated to her log. Then she paused, watching him sit alone at dusk, staring at nothing. She added softly, "The psychological cost is significant." Amara Asante noticed the new laborer on her third day back in the village. She was walking the path to the well, her mind preoccupied with budgets for her school's new roof. She saw him struggling to lift a particularly heavy stone, his form all wrong. Without thinking, she called out, "Bend your knees, not your back. You'll break yourself." Kofi looked up, startled. Their eyes met. For Amara, it was a simple moment of helpfulness. For the man with no memory, it was the first clear, kind instruction he had received in this new world. He managed an awkward nod. "Thank you, ma'am." His voice was hoarse from disuse. Something in its tone, a particular gravelly depth, made Amara pause for a fraction of a second. A strange, fleeting sense of déjà vu washed over her, so subtle she dismissed it as the heat. The next day, she saw him again, buying a single mango from a vendor with intense concentration, as if the transaction were a complex equation. She watched him hand over the coins, his movements careful and deliberate. A memory flashed. Kwame, early in their marriage, meticulously learning how to haggle at a market to make her laugh, his billionaire's awkwardness so endearing. She shook her head, clearing the thought. This man was just a poor, struggling laborer, yet a pull of compassion. The same force that built her schools tugged at her. As he turned, she approached. "The work on Mr. Boateng's wall is hard," she said. "I run the community school. We sometimes need help moving supplies. The pay is the same, but the work is in the shade." Kofi stared at her, almost through her. The offer was too complex. "School supplies, shade," he simply nodded, unable to formulate a proper response. "Okay," he whispered. Amara smiled, a warm, genuine smile that lit up her face. In the lab, Dr. Okafor leaned forward. First direct interaction. Duration, 23 seconds. Subject's heart rate spiked, then stabilized lower than baseline. Interesting. This is how the experiment truly began, not with a grand meeting, but with a job offer. Kofi started working at the school, moving desks, stacking books, repairing a shutter. Amara was often there, directing, teaching, laughing with the children. Kofi watched her. He had no memories of love or marriage, but he recognized goodness. He saw the way children ran to her, the patience in her voice, the intelligence in her eyes, as she solved a dozen small problems before noon. A feeling, formless and deep, began to stir in the emptiness where his past had been. It wasn't memory, it was attraction. A gravitational pull toward this light in his dark world. For Amara, Kofi was a puzzle. He was clearly uneducated. His origins murky, yet he was meticulous. He fixed the shutter not just adequately, but with a clever, reinforced joint she hadn't suggested. He listened with absolute focus, his gaze intense and unsettlingly direct. Once she dropped a stack of papers and he caught a flying sheet mid-air, with the reflexes that seemed incongruent with a simple laborer. "You have quick hands," she remarked. He looked at the paper, then at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time. "I don't know," he mumbled. And the profound confusion in that statement struck her heart. She began to ensure he had an extra portion of lunch, citing it as payment for good work. She found herself talking to him as she worked, not expecting a reply, just filling his silence with stories of the village, her hopes for the school. It felt natural. Right in the lab, the team documented everything. Proximity increased by 300%. Conversational exchanges up 70. Subject shows marked decrease in stress biomarkers during and after interactions with target alpha. Dr. Okafor reviewed the logs. The data was clear. The amnesiac billionaire was becoming chemically and psychologically dependent on his own wife's kindness. The experiment was working, but one question gnawed at her. Were they measuring love, or just the predictable attachment of a traumatized man to the first source of warmth in his life? She voiced this to her assistant. We need a control, a stressor. They introduced the first test. A village man, also in need of work, was subtly encouraged by a planted observer to challenge Kofi, to accuse him of taking work from locals. A confrontation erupted near the market. The man pushed Kofi, shouting. Kofi's body tensed on the biofeed. Dr. Okafor saw his adrenaline spike. But instead of fighting, as the old Kwame, a fierce, competitive negotiator, might have, Kofi stepped back. He looked genuinely bewildered by the aggression. He simply said, "I'm sorry, I did not know," and walked away, leaving the man standing there, confused. The response was not strategic, it was instinctual. The memory wipe hadn't just removed his history, it had seemingly stripped away his defensive arrogance. Amara heard about the incident. That evening, she found him sitting by his rented room. "I heard what happened," she said. "You did the right thing. That man, his pride is hurt, not you." Kofi looked up at her in the twilight. Her face was soft. "Why are you kind to me?" he asked. The most complex sentence he had volunteered yet. Amara considered. "Because everyone deserves kindness," she said, "and you seem very alone." In that moment, the connection transcended data points. But the experiment's cold machinery was about to clash violently with the human heart. It was measuring Dr. Okafor. Under pressure from the ticking clock of Kwame's terminal prognosis, authorized a more aggressive test. They would simulate a crisis. A small, controlled fire would be set in a disused shed near the school. The team predicted Amara, as community leader, would take charge. They would observe Kofi's reaction. Would he run? Help? Would Amara look to him? The fire was set after dusk. Smoke curled into the sky. The alarm was raised. Amara, arriving swiftly, began directing people to form a bucket chain from the well. And then she saw Kofi. He was not fleeing. He was standing perfectly still, staring at the flames, his body rigid. On the monitors, his vital signs were going haywire. His pupils were dilated. This wasn't fear of a small fire. This was a full-blown, trauma-induced panic attack, a somatic memory his conscious mind could not access. The roar of the flames, the smell of smoke, it was triggering a deep, hidden horror. The memory of the yacht's med bay, the sterile fire of the neural procedure that erased him. He began to tremble violently. Amara saw his terror. She broke from the bucket line and ran to him. She didn't ask questions. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her, not the fire. "Kofi, look at me. Breathe. It's just a shed. It's okay. Look at me." Her voice was a command, firm and anchoring. Her thumbs stroked his cheeks, a gesture of startling intimacy. At her touch, his breathing hitched, then slowly began to synchronize with hers. The panic receded, replaced by a stunned, profound vulnerability. He was looking into the eyes of the woman he loved, and for the first time, he felt not just attraction, but a sense of cosmic, preordained safety. He didn't know why, he just knew. In the lab, Dr. Okafor watched her hand over her mouth. The fire test was a disaster. It had not tested their bond, it had violently forged it. And on the audio feed, she heard Amara's next words, spoken softly, just to Kofi, words that would change the entire course of the experiment. "Come with me. You shouldn't be alone tonight." He did not stay in her house, of course. The village had eyes, and Amara had a reputation. Instead, she arranged for him to sleep in a small, secure storeroom at the school, bringing him a clean mat and a blanket. That night, she sat with him until his tremors stopped, speaking softly about nothing in particular, the constellations, the sound of the night insects. It was in these quiet hours that the experiment transformed. It was no longer about observing interactions, it was about witnessing the birth of a love story, one they had lived before but were now living for the first time. In the lab, Dr. Okafor was facing a mutiny. Her assistant David slammed a tablet down. "This is no longer observation, Necker. This is entrapment. We are engineering her emotional attachment by putting a vulnerable, traumatized man in her path. Of course she's responding. It's her nature. We're not testing her love for Kwame. We're testing her basic humanity and then calling the result science." Okafor stared at the data, the clean graphs feeling suddenly obscene. "The protocol," she began. "The protocol is for a man who is dying." David shot back. Look at his latest blood work from the remote sampler. His white cell count is crashing. The cancer is advancing. He has months, not a year. He's getting weaker, and he doesn't even know why he's tired. They reviewed the hidden camera footage from the school storeroom. Amara was tucking the blanket around Kofi's shoulders, a gesture of such unthinking tenderness that Okafor had to look away. "We have to end this," David pleaded. "We tell her now." Okafor, the architect of this entire ordeal, finally voiced her deepest fear. "And if we tell her now, after she has begun to care for this stranger, what have we proven? That she would be rightfully horrified and disgusted by her husband's deception. That is not the answer he is dying for. We need the reversal trigger." The reversal trigger was the experiment's failsafe, a specific, profound emotional confirmation from Amara that would signal real love had been achieved. Kwame, in his planning, had defined it vaguely. "I'll know it when I see it." To Okafor, it now meant one thing. Amara had to choose Kofi, knowing it would cost her something real. The fire test had backfired. They needed a true sacrifice. In the village, a new rhythm emerged. Amara and Kofi developed a quiet routine. He helped at the school daily. She found reasons to be there, to share meals, to talk. He began to speak more. His sentences still simple, but his observations were startlingly acute. He fixed a broken water pump by intuitively understanding its pressure system. He organized the school's storage shed with a logical efficiency that amazed her. "You have a mind for systems, Kofi?" she told him one afternoon. He looked puzzled. "I don't know what that means," he said. "But when I look at a problem, the answer is just there." It was the ghost of Kwame Asante, the problem-solving billionaire, speaking through the amnesiac laborer. Amara's feelings were a storm of confusion. She was a married woman, her husband Kwame ostensibly away on an extended, stressful business trip, his calls becoming less frequent, his texts brief. She felt a growing guilt about her preoccupation with Kofi. Yet, being with Kofi felt inexplicably right, like a deep, forgotten part of herself was waking up. She found herself sharing things with him she hadn't shared with anyone, her fears for her school's funding, her loneliness even in her grand Accra life, her childhood dreams of being a painter. He listened, fully present, his eyes holding hers. It was more intimacy than she'd felt in years. The crisis came from the outside world. Amara's assistant in Accra called, frantic. A board member from Kwame's company, a man named Sedum, was asking difficult questions. Kwame had missed 2 critical board meetings. Rumors were swirling about his health, about a power grab by his deputy. The company's stock was dipping. Sedum was pressuring Amara, as the majority shareholder's spouse, to invoke a medical proxy, declare Kwame incapacitated, and install interim leadership that happened to be led by the very deputy, Sadhu Traore. It was a corporate coup, hidden in legalese. Amara was torn. Her husband's empire was under threat. She needed to return to Accra immediately to defend his interests. But leaving meant abandoning Kofi, who was growing visibly paler, more fatigued. He had coughed violently that morning, a handkerchief coming away with a faint, terrifying speckle of blood. He'd hidden it, but she'd seen. "You need to see a doctor," she insisted. He shook his head, fearful. No doctors, no hospitals. His phobia was absolute. Another fragment of the trauma he couldn't remember. In the lab, they intercepted the call. David was triumphant. "This is it. This is the trigger. She has to choose. Go to Accra to save her husband's empire, the life he built for her, or stay here to care for a sick, poor stranger who has nothing to offer her. That's the sacrifice." Okafor watched Amara's face on the monitor, etched with conflict. This was the cruelest test of all, and they hadn't even designed it. The real world had done it for them. Amara packed a small bag. Kofi watched from the doorway of the storeroom, his expression hollow. He didn't understand corporate takeovers, but he understood abandonment. He'd felt it his whole blank life. "You are leaving," he stated. It wasn't a question. "I have to." "It's family business," Amara said. The lie tasting like ash. "It will only be a few days." She reached out, almost taking his hand, but stopped herself. The tension was electric. "Will you be here when I return?" she asked. The question meaning more than she intended. Kofi looked at the ground. "I have nowhere else to go," he said. It broke her heart. She got into her car. She drove 5 kilometers down the dirt road toward the highway. The entire experiment team held their breath, watching her vehicle's blip on the GPS map. She was choosing the empire. The billionaire's wife was returning to the billionaire's world. The experiment had failed. Kwame Asante would die, knowing the truth he feared. Then the blip stopped. It paused at the junction for a full minute. In the car, Amara was crying. The face in her mind wasn't Kwame's, with his distant, preoccupied smile. It was Kofi's, looking at her with total, unguarded trust. She thought of the blood on his handkerchief. She thought of him alone, sick and scared. The weight of her husband's world, the boards, the stock, the fortune, felt like a foreign country. The weight of one man's need felt like home. She turned the car around. When she walked back into the school compound, Kofi was still sitting where she'd left him. He looked up, hope and fear warring in his eyes. Amara knelt in front of him. "I'm not going," she said, her voice firm. "Let's get you to a doctor." In that moment, she made her choice. Not as a wife, but as a woman. She chose the man in front of her. In the lab, David whispered, "My God, that's it. That's the trigger." Dr. Okafor felt no triumph, only a profound sorrow. They had their result. Amara's love was real. It was time to end the experiment. But ending it now meant shattering the very love they had just confirmed. She activated the protocol. Prepare the reversal suite. And someone needs to go to the village. We have to bring him in. His physiological decline is accelerating. The cancer, it's moving faster than we predicted. As Amara helped a weak Kofi into her car, a different unmarked vehicle sped down the road from the opposite direction. It carried two of Dr. Okafor's medics. They intercepted Amara's car at the edge of the village. The lead medic, a woman, stepped out, her expression grave but kind. "Mrs. Asante," she said. Amara froze at the use of her married name. "We need to take Kofi. We know what's wrong with him. We can help." Amara's protective instinct flared. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" The medic took a deep breath, delivering the line that would detonate Amara's world. "We work for your husband, Mrs. Asante, and so does he." She pointed to Kofi, who was slumped in the passenger seat, barely conscious. "Please, there's no time. He's dying." The world shattered for Amara in that instant. The words hung in the humid air, senseless and cruel. Her husband? This sick, lost man was her Kwame denial. Cold and sharp was her first shield. "That's impossible. You're lying." But the medic just gestured urgently toward the mobile lab vehicle. "We have to go now. We can explain everything, but his life is in danger." Amara looked at Kofi, Kwame, his eyes glassy with fever and confusion, the man she had chosen over an empire. A sob tore from her throat, part horror, part devastating understanding. She nodded, numb. The journey to the mobile lab was a blur. They transferred Kwame to a sterile medical pod within the vehicle. Dr. Neka Okafor was waiting, her face a mask of professional remorse. "Mrs. Asante, my name is Dr. Okafor. I need you to understand that everything we did, Kwame authorized. He designed this experiment. His diagnosis is pancreatic cancer. Stage 4, he has very little time left." She spoke quickly as monitors were attached to Kwame's chest. "The memory suppression is temporary. We can reverse it, but we need your consent to proceed." Amara felt the walls of the cramped lab closing in. Experiment, design, consent. The words were clinical bullets, the last 3 months replayed in her mind. Every kindness she'd shown Kofi, every growing feeling, every private confession. It had all been observed, measured, logged. Her privacy, her heart, had been a petri dish. A raw, furious betrayal rose in her, hotter than any anger she'd ever felt. But she looked at the man on the gurney, her husband dying and lost inside his own mind. The love she'd felt for Kofi and the 22 years of love for Kwame collided into a single painful truth. She still loved him, even now. Especially now. "Do it," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Bring him back." The reversal procedure was not a sudden awakening. It was a slow, agonizing return. Dr. Okafor administered a series of neural catalysts and targeted electrical stimuli. Kwame's body arched off the bed, a silent scream on his lips. On the monitors, Dormant pathways in his brain lit up like cities powering on after a blackout. Memories, fragmented and violent, flooded back, the taste of poison metaphorical from Seydou's betrayal, the cold glass of the yacht's med bay, the crushing weight of his diagnosis, the desperate, lonely plan, and then newer, softer memories playing in reverse. Amara's hand on his cheek during the fire, her laugh in the schoolyard, the profound peace in her quiet storeroom, the searing pain of watching her drive away, and the cosmic relief when she returned. He felt it all. The architect of the experiment was finally experiencing its results from the inside. He awoke not as Kofi, but as Kwame Asante. The weight of his identity, his wealth, his sickness, and his monumental deception crashed down upon him. His eyes opened, and they were different. The blankness was gone, replaced by a storm of intelligence, pain, and shame. The first face he saw was Amara's. She stood across the pod, arms wrapped around herself, tears streaming silently down her face. He knew, in that one look, that she knew everything. "Amara," he croaked, his voice his own again, rich and deep and broken. She didn't move. Why? The single word held universes of hurt. He had prepared a speech, but it evaporated. All that remained was the raw, unvarnished truth. "Because I was dying," he said, each word a struggle. "And I was terrified that the one true thing in my life was a lie. That you loved the life I gave you, not the man I was. I needed to know before I left you forever that you could see me, just me. You didn't trust me," she said, the betrayal cutting deeper than the deceit. "You turned my compassion into a test, our love into data points. I was wrong," he admitted, the full force of his foolishness overwhelming him. "I was so wrong. The man you loved as Kofi, that was the man I always wanted to be for you. Uncluttered, present, real. You didn't just pass a test, Amara. You showed me who I should have been all along." He began to cough, a racking, deep cough that left him gasping. "Doctor." Okafor moved forward, but he waved her off. His eyes locked on his wife. The corporate crisis couldn't wait. With Kwame lucid, though frail, they connected him via secure video to his board. Amara watched from the corner as the man who had been hauling stones just days before now, propped up on pillows, dismantled Seydou Traore's coup with cold, razor-sharp precision. His voice was weak, but his mind was a scalpel. He presented medical records, omitting the experiment, affirmed his control, and announced Amara would hold his voting proxy indefinitely. The billionaire was back, saving his empire from his deathbed. But when the call ended, the energy left him completely. He was just a sick man again, who had hurt the person he loved most. In the days that followed, they moved to a private hospice suite in Accra. The truth was contained within a tiny, trusted circle. The public story was that Kwame had been undergoing aggressive, secret treatment. The reality was a fragile, silent space between husband and wife. Amara was torn apart. The betrayal was profound. Yet the man she had fallen for in the village was also, undeniably, her husband. His eyes now held the kindness of Kofi and the depth of Kwame. He was both men, and she loved both. But could she forgive the architect of such pain? 1 week before the end, Kwame made his final move. He called his lawyers and Dr. Okafor to his bedside. With Amara present, he had rewritten his entire will. The bulk of his estate, the companies, the holdings, would not go to Amara as a passive inheritance. Instead, it would fund the Kofi Initiative, a foundation she would helm, dedicated to building schools, medical clinics, and sustainable housing across the continent. The work she'd always loved now at a scale he could finally give her. He was not leaving her a fortune, he was leaving her a purpose, built in the name of the man she chose in the village. "The money was never the point," he said to her, his breathing shallow. "You were. This lets you keep being who you are, without the shadow of my ghost." The final surprise came from Dr. Okafor. The aggressive cancer had paradoxically been slowed slightly by the physical austerity and lower stress of his life as Kofi. The timeline was still short, but they had gained a few precious weeks. Time not for more tests, but for a different kind of truth. On his last good day, Amara came to his bedside. She didn't speak of forgiveness. The word was too small. Instead, she took his hand, the hand that had clumsily held a trowel and confidently signed billion seedy deals. "I loved Kwame," she said softly, "and I loved Kofi. They were always the same man. You just forgot for a while. So did I." She leaned down and kissed him, a kiss that held 22 years, 3 months of deception, and a love that had, against all odds, passed its cruelest possible test. Kwame Asante died 3 days later, not as a billionaire questioning his legacy, but as a man who had received his answer. He was buried not with the fanfare of a tycoon, but quietly in the soil of Amara's village, near the school where they had met for the second time. Amara, now the head of a vast foundation, still lives between Accra and Koforidua. She visits the grave often. Sometimes she smiles, sometimes she cries, but she is at peace, building a future she chose, for a love that was proven real in the most devastating way imaginable. So what does this story leave us with? Not a fairy tale, but a haunting human truth. Kwame Asante's experiment was born from a place of profound love and profound fear. He wielded his vast fortune not to build a taller tower, but to construct the ultimate test for his own heart. In doing so, he traded his final months of comfort for a brutal, beautiful answer. He learned that the love of his life did not love his life, she loved the man living it, even when that man had nothing, not even his own name. It forces a question onto all of us. How much of what we call love is tangled with convenience, with security, with the reflected glow of status? We spend our lives building identities, careers, bank accounts, social personas, and then we ask to be loved for who we are underneath. But what if we, like Kwame, are afraid to look underneath ourselves? His story is an extreme mirror. It asks us to consider the masks we wear and whether we have the courage to believe we are loved for the face beneath, not the mask itself. Amara's journey is the other half of the truth. She was betrayed in the most intimate way possible. Her compassion was weaponized against her, yet in the wreckage, she found that her feelings were not a trick. They were real, transcending the deception. Her forgiveness was not an obligation, but a choice made from the same deep well of love that drew her to the stranger in the village. Her story is about the resilience of the human heart to recognize its own, even through a veil of lies. Kwame Asante died with his question answered. Amara Asante lives with that answer as her foundation. Their story is a paradox, a testament to love's durability built on an act of near unforgivable doubt. It reminds us that in the end our greatest treasures are not what we have, but what we are willing to risk to know the truth about them, and perhaps that the purest love is not the one that is tested, but the one that never required a test in the first place. If this story made you think, made you feel, made you question what lies beneath the surface of your own relationships, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from right now? If you believe in stories that dig deep into the human heart, don't forget to subscribe. The next one is already waiting.